Welcome to the Leadership Conversation with me, Dr. Dennis V. Burke. Today, let's discuss motivation and attitude. So, we've consistently emphasized the fact that three things are important in habits. We say knowledge, attitude, knowledge, and skill. And I emphasize the order in which those are applied or considered. I say attitude, knowledge, and skill because knowledge can be gained or developed with the right attitude, and skill is a function of having knowledge and the right attitude. And when those three components overlap in the right proportion, we have habits. The habits, consistent habits, are identified as the character. But when we pull each piece apart to try to understand it, we need to understand what constitutes attitude, right? And so a person's attitude is quite often informed by what they believe, that is, the values they bring. And remember that values are often subconscious. Once you believe something and that becomes a governing value in your life, we're able to actually push that back into the subconscious and not think about it as we make decision, but it does inform how we process our experience. For instance, let's say as a child, you woke up on a rainy day, right? And it was overcast. You looked out the window and you did note, oh, it's raining. I can't go outside to play today. And you walked into the kitchen and everyone had a gloomy look on their face, and you learned that your favorite pet had passed, right? Or died. And then that might be some sort of traumatic experience as a child. And you push that into your subconscious at some point growing up, 30, 40 years later. You wake up, you look out the window, it's raining, and suddenly you feel gloomy, right? Because in your subconscious, you somehow have imprinted rainy days with bad news. You're not consciously aware of why you feel that way, but you've actually created emotional pathways that links bad news with rainy days, right? And we do that with almost all experiences we have that are impactful in our psyche, right? And somehow traumatic and negative experience seem to linger much more longer or more effective than pleasant experiences. However, when pleasant experiences or linger or create pathways, they have to be probably extreme, right? You said you have an absolutely fabulous experience and that imprints, but standard experience are just average, not meaningful, and sometimes they create no impact in our psyche because we can't remember everything. So it seems like our emotional ability or mental ability memorizes or records the things that are extreme. That's important. Extreme event. So when we think of attitude, we must understand the underlying motives, right? A person's attitude is influenced by their motives. Motive is influenced by needs, right? We have this, what we call the moral imperative to protect our well-being. We are wired that way. And if someone puts themselves in danger, we typically say they have some either mental, emotional, or substance issue, right? So keep that in mind. Our attitude is governed by our motivation. Our motivation is influenced by our needs. And so there we key in. When we relate to people, when we manage people, and in the social or professional setting, you stand back and you recognize someone's attitude, even if you're interviewing, you're hiring someone, or you're resolving some challenge within a team setting, and you look at someone's attitude and you say, all right, it would be extremely helpful to understand why do they behave or respond the way they do? Why do they approach relationship or communication or challenges the way they do? And you should work to understand what the need or needs are that's driving the people that you're working with, the team members. What's the underlying need that make them tick? What's the underlying need that make them come to work? What's the underlying need that will interfere or interrupt their thought process? Once you understand the need, then you understand what motivates the person. For instance, you wouldn't be able to motivate someone to perform by promising them a trip to the Bahamas if their most pressing need is to find a home to live in, right? Or to provide food for their family. So a gift card to their favorite grocery store or cash that would help them to purchase food and pay for rent or mortgage would be more meaningful and would drive performance. One problem that comes in with attitude and the motivation need relationship is the fact that if we do something enough, we create habits. And so the underlying habit that's driven by the need may become entrenched, right, as a habit. A person who has food insecurity and has fear of being hungry or having hungry children is then motivated by the need to provide food for the family. If that need exists long enough and that fear gets pressed into the subconscious, now think of our motivation on layers, and then on a continuum. So that food insecurity is at a basic need, and the fear is at one end of the continuum. That fear that drives the person's behavior might be manifested in their passive acceptance of abuse in the workplace or in personal relationship, right? Or worst case scenario, at the next end of that spectrum, they might be overly aggressive because they'll do anything to get the food. So you see, at one end, we have this passive acceptance of abuse. At the other end, we have this extreme aggression, and somewhere in between, we may have what's the healthy approach. But let's say a person is at the lower end, they operate with fear. Now they now have enough food. Food is no longer a concern, and the next primary concern is a home, right? Well, let's assume that, okay, they're in a home now, and they're in a relationship that provides a secure home. But the habit that was formed, the motivation, the attitude that was driven by the fear comes along with them, and only with knowledge, right? A deliberate reflection, seeking out knowledge, seeking out help, might that person be able to move on that continuum, that housing continuum, from a fear-based position, passive acceptance or aggression, to a healthy place. They're no longer hungry, no longer concerned about food. They're now in a social, motivated by the need for social relating, but they carry that unhealthy fear, motivation, and attitude into that relationship, and now they're driven by fear even in that social, so they treat the people that they're working with that unhealthy attitude, and they don't understand. This happens every day. Attitude is governed by need and motivation. Needs and motivation. Knowledge, the impact of knowledge cannot be overstated. It is important that we always take time out. When things are good, don't wait until we have conflict to learn about the people we are associating and working with. And it is important that for us, ourselves, we have what we call an individual development plan, a roadmap for our development. And when we manage people, we need to help them to design, develop, and implement a roadmap for their individual development, so that they're continually learning about themselves and about relationships and the people they work with, and so that they too, just like you do, have a path for growth, development, and for success. Go forth and do good work. Thank you for watching this leadership conversation with me, Dr. Dennis V. Burke, and I'll see you in the next episode.